It's Don here from the board. Thanks for coming along and checking out this video. So today's video is going to be a look at a very long project that I've been working on practically for all of 2018. And what I'm talking about is my own keyboard design, but it's a little bit different, and it's called the down bubble. And I've finally completed the prototype for it, and I'm going to be using this keyboard hopefully at work to really test its feel, its format, its layout, and its design before I move onwards to any other activities relating to this keyboard. I had been playing with my split 75%, the VA clone that I got from Taobao, and I've been kind of using it for a while now at work, but one of the things about it was it didn't have a numpad, and rather than trying to program layers into it, because I'm not really a layer type of person, I would just have a separate numpad on the side, and I would have it on the outside of my mouse. So I would be keyboarding, mouse, and then numpad to the side. I have a lot of space at work for a full-size keyboard, and there's no issues with that, and I really do use the numpad for a lot of number related activities for work. So I wanted something that could incorporate the feel, the style, the comfort levels of having a split keyboard like the VA clone, but still be able to retain the numpad. And I started playing around with layouts, and I was moving my keyboard around, and I was putting things here and there, and I decided that I wanted to try putting the numpad in the middle between the two halves. And that kind of worked out really, really well. But then I took it a little bit further because I wanted it to be more ergonomic, which resulted in me actually turning and tilting the numpad to an angled position. And you know what? I really liked that. I felt that it worked really, really well, and so I kind of embarked on the journey to make that happen as a prototype. I have a 3D printer, and you would have seen stuff that I've done before using 3D printing, but the printer itself kind of fell into quite a bit of neglect over time, and it wasn't printing to size correctly, and I had issues with my printing bed warping and stuff like that because of its age and use. But through help from people on Discord and the 3D printing community and the Discord mechanical keyboard community, I managed to get it back up and running to a decent point. I got a glass bed, I got some heat transfer pads, so the heat from the original bed would go through and then into the glass bed. Because I print with ABS, I don't have PLA, and I also managed to retighten up the belt tension on my printer, so it was printing pretty close. Now, when I do print though, I still have to scale it to 101.6% rather than leaving it at 100%, because that's just how things are with my printer for some reason. Anyway, so I finally printed all the pieces, I glued them together, and then I hand wired it, and voila, I now have a working keyboard. So let's have a look at the down bubble prototype. Now what I've got here is, it's actually got its kind of guts exposed at the moment, because I wanted to show you the hand wiring oddity, I suppose. Not really oddity, but just something different how I've approached it compared to like a normal hand wire. So first of all, this controller is equivalent to a Teensy 2++, in that it's got a lot of pins on it, 36 or something like that. It uses the 9 USB 1286 chip instead of the 32U4. I got this as part of the Scrabble pad group buy. I bought an extra because I knew that I wanted to use a bigger controller for a full-size keyboard. But what I've done differently to this with the hand wiring is I've actually not soldered my wires, my columns and my rows to the actual controller. I've put them onto a header. So I'm just going to tilt it because I don't want to be unplugging it, because I've found that unplugging it and plugging it on a regular basis is actually likely to damage my solder connections, because they're not very good solder connections. But what I've done is there's a header block there, and what I mean by that is the standard controller and the pins fit into your standard sockets, your 2.54 mil header pins, these things, okay, that I've looked at before and I've shown, and I thought, you know, why not solder the actual Rosen diodes directly to these pins, and then if there's any issues I can just unsocket the actual controller and use it somewhere else if I need to. And same goes for Pro Micros. So that's exactly what I did. I hand wired to all of these. This in itself was actually an excellent move because I discovered when I was soldering I wasn't paying a lot of attention, and I had inadvertently soldered to the pins on this controller the R and ground pins. So if it'll come into focus, so you'll see in the middle on the right there where the green wires are going in, it's kind of lost its focus a little bit there, probably because I'm not holding it very steady, but there's ground and there's R in the middle, and I had inadvertently soldered to it, and it obviously messed up my pin map. So instead of desoldering these, all I did was I pulled out the little metal tines for the header and I swapped their position, and bang, I was back to good. So doing that was really, really good, but the downside is, of course, it adds an extra 8mm of height. So unless if you have space to play, and because this keyboard is actually quite thick, having the negative angle designed into it, it can actually house that. So that's why I was able to get away with it. Now you can actually find shorter header pins, but you generally have to order them special order. I found somebody locally here who had contacts, but they said it was a minimum order of 10,000 to get them manufactured, and well, that's not going to happen anytime soon. So that's what I've done. I've actually got the USB Mini B going into that, and I've just taped it in so it stays in place, and of course I've sort of just covered the bottom end with a bit of cardboard at the moment for protection purposes, and I've made like a little slidey cover, as you can sort of see, just so that everything is sort of neatly kept out of the way and not going to get damaged from regular use. So let's just tack my masking tape back down over it. I'm not going to say it's a perfect solution or it's a beautiful solution, but you know what, it works. I've put a couple of small bump-ons here so that it doesn't really slide around. And if you haven't seen the post on Reddit, and if you haven't seen it via Instagram yet, lo and behold, here is the down bubble in its SA Vomit glory. Now, I've left my normal keyboard here just for a comparative size, so you can see that it's a full size keyboard, pretty much smack bang on. It fits the same width, but it does lose a couple of keys. So what I'm talking about here is on this right hand side, rather than having the full 3 column, it actually shrinks down to a 2 column. And we also lose the num lock key here as well in the middle. But other than that, what you do gain is down here on the bottom row, you gain an extra key here next to the arrows. And then you have an extra key because it's a split spacebar, and you have an extra key on the left hand side as well. So you kind of do compensate for that, but it just depends on your particular preferences on how you need and use your keys. What I've put on here is a sculpted SA set, and there's actually a logic and reason behind that. A lot of people have issues with using a sculpted SA because of its curvature, because of its height as it moves across the rows. By having a negative angle, and I'll show you what I mean in a second with negative angle, is that it actually flattens and levels this out. So a standard keyboard is either flat or positive angle, in that the escape row comes up, and this is a positive angle. Typically anywhere up to 5 degrees, 7 degrees is quite normal. You can probably go a lot more aggressive depending on if you wanted to, with bigger feet and things like that. A negative angle means the escape row, that first row, tilts away from you. And there's an ergonomic thought behind that. Now, whether it actually is true or whether it's effective as an ergonomic design, I can't comment because I'm not an occupational therapist. I'm not a biomechanics specialist or anything like that. But it's purely a personal choice and feel, because at work I'd actually created my own negative angle by putting cardboard on the spacebar row, on the bottom row edge of my keyboard, so it had that negative angle, and I really enjoyed using that. So if I show you the side profile, noting that this is the escape row and that's the spacebar row, you can see we have a lot more height here and less height there. Now there's a curvature because I got a bit of warp on that, but it wasn't major. So if I flip it around, you'll see the same sort of much thicker, not as thick in a straighter line. This is 3 centimeters and I think this is 2 centimeters here. Okay, so it's only 1 centimeter across that entire difference, but that's actually a 5 degree. So it's actually a 5 degree negative angle. But the result is, if I can kind of tilt that, I do have a picture of my Imager album, Silly People on the Roads with Motorbikes, is that this SA sculpted profile is now almost level. Now it doesn't really show very well with this, so you will have to go and have a look at it from the side on picture, but it is actually almost level relative to the surface of your table. You're just going to have to trust me until you get to check out the album. Now the second thing about the ergonomics in general is that I've got a approximate 5 degree tilt, okay, on that split. Now I'm just going to move my regular keyboard out of the way since it's kind of done what it's was left there to show. Alright. I had somebody actually comment about this ruler, Chifley College, and just to address that, I didn't go to Chifley College, I didn't study there, I didn't teach there, but I possibly could have. I was doing a Masters of Teaching degree and we had to go on school visits, and Chifley College was one of them, and they gave us, a little sort of goodie bag, a show bag for visiting them, and that was where that ruler came from. Now, so you can kind of see that the keys are already showing, like naturally it would sit kind of like that, and it's sort of just gently tilting away. What was I going to say? Yes, so it's got a 5 degree angle, so it kind of looks like angry eyebrows when your eyebrows are tilted in and sort of lift like that. But it means that your elbows, right, your elbows are more natural. Rather than them being tucked in straight like this, they're relaxed. Because if you just normally let your body hang out, what's happening under here pushes your arms out. And so your hands naturally will have an angle to it. Your hands aren't naturally like this, right? So that's a standard keyboard, and then a 5 degree is actually really, really comfortable in this context. But then if you're going to be moving to using a numpad on the outside of the keyboard, then it should be straight. And the TGR Alice kind of addresses that, because the edges of these keys are actually orientated straight rather than a complete slant like what I've done here. So for your mouse on the side, so if I shift all of this over here, if your mouse is on the side, that's fine. But then as you go out even further, right, so if I shift this over here and I go, well, here's my mouse, and then if I have a numpad, so this is angled, this is now straight for the mouse, I'm now rotating outwards. Now if I keep it straight, my elbow, as you can see, my arm is extending, and this is not so ergonomic. So the same concept was like, if I put my numpad in the middle, I don't want it straight, because now my wrist is at an unnatural angle, right? It's at an unnatural angle. So I had this mocked up with my 2 halves and a numpad, and I ended up rotating it, because when I type from here and I rotate, there's a natural angle change because it's pivoting around my elbow. It's a very small amount of movement, but it's a natural movement and it makes sense, right? Mechanically, biomechanically, moving here, typing my numbers or whatever it is, back to here. The movement is very little and very natural, and that angle helps with that. I had to cut out the num key, the numlock key here, so that I could get this angle tilt in, and you'll notice that there's a very small sort of gap here. I could compress this even further in, but I chose to leave a 1/4 unit just for clearance, because if I had this flush up here and you make a mistake, then you're not likely to hit that accidentally if you're typing and you're not used to typing like this. And similarly for the B and the N, you know, if you're the type of person as you're starting to learn and you're falling off into the void like I did, you're not going to be hitting the enter or the 1, which the enter could be quite disastrous. What I have discovered interestingly though is the use of split keys now means I can type a sentence and thumb enter if I really want to, rather than pinky enter. So your thumb is a lot stronger than your pinky. So as you're typing, you can now be like an ergonomics or an iris or any of the others and actually have a thumb enter action and thumb backspace. So thumb backspace, thumb enter. A plus a numpad. And down here, I've actually assigned that as backspace and that as backspace just because I could. And I still have the backspace up here. I've put the numlock up here so I can actually use that as a numlock. And up here where the pause key is, I've actually turned that into just a single macro key for Windows L to lock my terminal. So I'm intending to take this to work, and I can basically get up and just hit that. And I put the pause key there because it's kind of like pausing my computer terminal. So there you go. There's the actual design. I do realize that the front is very high, and right now if I rest my arms on the keyboard, it does produce an unnatural angle. But the intent is if you're keeping a good height and posture, because my desk is too high here at home with the way that I sit because I'm lazy. But if I... how do I use my own chair? Oh, there we go. Whoa. Okay, so if I... so I've got short legs, which is why my chair is so low. But if I'm actually sitting at a good height relative and my arms are straight, so it's just... so if my arms are actually level like you're meant to be... okay. I do apologize for aiming the camera slightly at my crotch. So now that I've elevated my chair, my feet are actually literally dangling off the ground. But at this height, you'll see my wrists, if I sit up straight, are actually quite natural. The incline is all the way down. It's not pushing my wrists up, which is actually unnatural. So this is actually really relaxed. This is actually really relaxed. And I'm typing really, really horribly. So and then of course, as you can see up in the camera, the amount of rotation required versus a lot more movement to get to where a natural numpad, mouse, and further is. It's just straight up typing here, rotate into here, and you'll see there's barely any movement happening at all on my right hand side. Now of course, if you're a lefty numpad, this doesn't work for you. This doesn't work for you at all. And at the moment, I don't have a solution on how to redesign something similarly, simply because of these keys here. There was a thought process that if I shifted these across one, and then I turned that into a single 1U instead of the 2U, I could possibly achieve something very similar. But naturally, I'm not left-handed, and it wasn't one of my primary sort of objectives in building this. So there you have it. Now, this is 3D printed. It's got box whites in it, and it's very thin plastic. The actual thickness of the plate layer is 1.5 millimeters, so that the switches can actually clip in, so I didn't have to glue them in or anything like that. So I will give you a typing sound, but it doesn't mean anything, right? It's not indicative of anything whatsoever, simply because it is 3D printed. The back end of it is hand-wired, so there's no plate. It's just because I can give you a bit of ASMR, maybe. So let's just drop the mic down and I'll give you some random typing, and we'll see how that sounds. Plus, of course, all the traffic from a afternoon. So that was just random key mashing, but in a steady pace more than anything else. And of course my camera doesn't want to refocus again properly. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I am now going to drop my chair because I don't enjoy having my feet hanging out. Alright, so you can see there's quite a bit of height because my wrists are now at a different angle and my elbows are lower, and you no longer have to look at my crotch. Okay, so there is the down bubble prototype, 3D printed. It's powered by QMK, not sponsored by QMK. It doesn't really move very much because I put the bump-ons there, at least on this IKEA table surface, which is fine. And it's relatively lightweight because it's 3D printed. Where do I want to go from here? Where do I want to go from here? I would love to personally, if I take this to work and I discover that it does everything that I want it to do and it is comfortable the way that it is to take this to the next level and turn it into an actual custom. And when I say turn it into an actual custom, I mean get it done in metal. Now, the reason why it's called a down bubble is there's some nautical aspects to it. It's a little bit strange, I know, but it's a down bubble because it's a negative angle, and that means, for example, a submarine diving, right? The second thing is, in a funny way, this actually looks like a ship. So this is actually the front end of the ship, the forecastle up here, and this is the bulbous end of the ship. You have to use your imagination a little bit. This is the middle of the ship after it's actually been hit by a torpedo from a submarine, and this is actually the ship breaking apart into 3 pieces before it sinks. Not that it's a great analogy if you want to run a group buy or a keycap set, by the way, because you don't want your group buy to sink, but I thought it would be a bit of fun. And if I was to actually get this done properly into a custom keyboard and a metal keyboard, then what I would also want to do is actually have a cutout here and be able to put in an actual level, like a liquid level in there. And so you can see that it has a negative angle. But with feet options available though, what you can do is you can actually tilt it to 0 degrees if you like the physical layout but not the negative angle, and then you can still flip it up to your standard 5 degrees or 7 degrees, and you can still get that angle that you prefer from your normal keyboards, and the level would indicate that, but you still get to have this split layout and the natural ergonomics of it. So that's kind of my long-term plans. I don't know how it's going to be financed, how long it's going to take. I definitely will need to reach out to other people, for example Kevin from the board, because he's actually created and had custom metal keyboards done, as well as Outrage Pudding, maybe, if he's got the capacity to help me with designing graphics and promotional materials and so on and so forth. So that's long term, and of course it's definitely not going to happen in 2018, but it's something I'll be working through towards in 2019. So there you have it. Down bubble prototype done, working. It's been a long journey, and there's still plenty to go. So thank you very much for checking out this video. I hope you've enjoyed seeing it, hearing it, getting a little bit of the background and understanding on the design philosophy, I suppose, the ergonomics behind why it looks the way it looks, and my reasons for creating it. I live in a terrible neighborhood. Plus the main road is literally like 3 meters past my window. So it's just Sydney life. Alright, well, we're going to leave it there. Thanks for checking out the video. Please hit that like button if you really liked the video and the content here. Please hit that subscribe button if you've become a new fan of our stuff. And of course, we have a podcast series that you can check out where we talk about mechanical keyboards as well. And if you'd like to support us and help fund more wacky things like this and help see this come to fruition, you can check out our Patreon, and of course all links in the description below. So, as usual, until next time, happy clacking.